Have you ever woken up after what should have been a full night's sleep and still felt exhausted? Maybe you've watched the clock creep past midnight, hoping that if you closed your eyes just a little tighter, sleep would finally come. Or perhaps you fall asleep without much trouble, only to wake up feeling as though your mind never truly rested. For millions of people, this has become an ordinary part of life. We drink another cup of coffee. We push through the afternoon. We promise ourselves we'll get to bed earlier tonight. And then somehow the day slips away, the lights stay on a little longer, the phone stays in our hands a little longer, and the cycle quietly begins again. After a while, we stop asking why. We start believing that feeling tired is simply the price of living in the modern world. But what if it isn't? What if the problem isn't that our bodies have forgotten how to sleep, but that we've forgotten how to prepare for it? Because for most of human history, sleep wasn't treated as something you had to chase at the end of a long day. It was supported by the way the entire day was lived. And if that's true, then perhaps the question isn't how to force ourselves to sleep better. Perhaps the real question is, what have we forgotten about sleep? The more historians and researchers have studied the rhythms of ancient life, the more a fascinating pattern begins to emerge. Across different civilizations, separated by thousands of miles, different languages, and entirely different beliefs, many approached rest in ways that feel surprisingly intentional. As the sun began to set, the pace of life often changed with it. Homes grew quieter, lamps replaced daylight. Evening meals were usually simple. Conversation slowed. In many traditions, the final hours before sleep weren't treated as time to squeeze in one more task, but as a gradual transition from activity to stillness. No one called it sleep hygiene. There were no smartwatches tracking sleep cycles, no blue light glasses, no bedtime apps reminding people to wind down. And yet, many cultures seem to understand something that feels strangely unfamiliar today. The body doesn't simply switch from wakefulness to deep rest. It eases into it. Was every ancient culture the same? Of course not. Life was often difficult, and sleep was far from perfect. But despite their differences, a remarkable idea appears again and again throughout history. Rest wasn't seen as an isolated event that began the moment your head touched the pillow. It was something prepared for. And if generations before us instinctively built their evenings around that idea, what did they notice about the human mind and body that we've gradually overlooked? Because that's where this story truly begins. Perhaps the greatest difference between our world and many ancient ones wasn't that people slept longer or more deeply. It was that they rarely treated sleep as something that began at bedtime. Across many traditions, the hours leading up to rest mattered just as much as the hours spent asleep. The day had its own rhythm. Morning invited light and movement. Work had its place. Meals followed familiar patterns. As evening arrived, life gradually became quieter. It wasn't because people understood circadian rhythms or the science of the nervous system as we describe them today. They simply noticed something that generations of observation had taught them. The body responds to rhythm. Modern science now offers an explanation for many of those observations. Our brains are constantly taking in signals from the world around us, light and darkness, activity and stillness, stress and calm. These cues help regulate the internal clock that influences when we feel alert and when we begin to feel sleepy. When those signals are consistent, the transition into rest often feels more natural. When they're constantly interrupted, the body receives mixed messages. In many ways, that's the hidden challenge of modern life. Bright screens blur the difference between day and night. Work follows us home. Notifications compete for our attention. Even when our bodies are exhausted, our minds are often being told to stay awake just a little longer. Seen through that lens, the wisdom of many ancient traditions begins to feel less mysterious. They weren't trying to force sleep to happen. They were shaping the conditions that allowed sleep to arrive on its own. And perhaps that's the idea we've slowly drifted away from. When you step back and look across history, something remarkable begins to appear. For thousands of years, people lived in different climates, spoke different languages, and built entirely different civilizations. Yet many arrived at a surprisingly similar understanding. Rest could not be separated from the way life was lived. Perhaps that's why so many traditions welcome the evening with intention rather than urgency. Not because the night itself held some special power, but because it marked a gentle transition, a chance to release the demands of the day before, asking the mind and body to surrender to sleep. Some found that transition in quiet reflection, others in prayer, some through slow breathing, others by simply sitting beneath the fading light as the sun slipped below the horizon. The practices were different, but the wisdom behind them was strikingly similar. Instead of asking, "How can I make myself fall asleep?" they first asked, "How can I prepare myself for rest?" It's a subtle difference, yet it changes everything, because perhaps true rest has never been something we can command. Like a sunrise or the changing of the seasons, it arrives in its own time when the conditions are right. And maybe that's what so many generations understood. That peace isn't created in the final few minutes before bed. It's quietly cultivated throughout the day until sleep no longer feels like something to chase, but something that naturally finds you. If there's one lesson we can borrow from the ancient world, perhaps it's not a single ritual or tradition. It's a different way of approaching the end of the day. Instead of waiting until your head touches the pillow to think about sleep, begin preparing for rest while you're still awake. As evening arrives, let your surroundings tell the same story your body is trying to hear. Dim the lights if you can. Put away the screen a little earlier than usual. Allow a few moments of quiet before reaching for another distraction. Take a slow breath, then another. Not because these small actions guarantee a perfect night's sleep, but because together they gently signal that the day is coming to an end. These aren't complicated techniques, they're simple reminders. Reminders that rest isn't something we earn only after we've exhausted ourselves. It's something we make space for. You don't need to live in a mountain monastery or follow an ancient tradition exactly as it was practiced centuries ago. The wisdom isn't found in copying the past. It's found in understanding the principle behind it, and allowing that principle to find a place in your own life, one quiet evening at a time. Perhaps the greatest lesson the ancient world offers us isn't that it discovered a secret to perfect sleep. It's something far simpler. That rest was never meant to be an afterthought. For generations, many people understood that the way we greet the morning, move through the afternoon, and welcome the evening all shape the night that follows. Somewhere along the way, many of us began treating sleep as a problem to solve instead of a rhythm to protect. Maybe that's why so many nights feel like a battle. But perhaps they don't have to. Tonight, don't worry about changing everything. Just notice the way your day prepares you for rest. Notice the light. Notice the noise. Notice the moments that invite calm, and the moments that quietly steal it away. Because every meaningful journey begins the same way. Not with perfection, but with awareness. And perhaps that's what this path has always been about. Not returning to the past, but remembering the wisdom that can help us live more fully in the present. In our next chapter, we'll explore one of the most overlooked parts of that journey, how the final hours before bedtime quietly shape the quality of the night that follows. Until then, may your evening begin long before you close your eyes.